السيدات والسادة، الرجاء الجلوس في مقاعدكم. سوف يبدأ هذا الحدث الآن.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. This event is about to begin.
التدفق إلى المستقبل. نزيل الحواجز. نقلص الزمن. نقرب المسافات. نتدفق سوياً. مزيج من المعرفة والأفكار. تتوهج الحكمة. ويتجلى الابتكار. تصنع القطرات شلالاً صخباً. مستقبلنا يزدهر، مستقبلنا التدفق.
أصحاب السعادة، الحضور الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نرحب بكم في حوارات الخدمات الحكومية ضمن فعاليات القمة العالمية للحكومات. حوارات الخدمات الحكومية هي منصة تفاعلية حوارية تجمع صناع القرار في القطاع الحكومي والخبراء العالميين لإعادة تعريف المفاهيم المستخدمة في تصميم وتقديم الخدمات الحكومية، حيث ستجمع في نسختها الرابعة لفعاليات القمة العالمية للحكومات قادة الفكر العالميين من القطاعين الحكومي والخاص لعرض أهم التوجهات المستقبلية التي ستساهم في تشكيل ثقافتنا ومجتمعاتنا في السنوات المقبلة. نتمنى لكم حوارات شيقة نكتشف فيها مستقبل الخدمات الحكومية.
A very good evening to you all. Welcome to the special season of the GX Talks as part of the World Government Summit 2022. It is our pleasure to host this event at this unique venue, the DP World Pavilion. Launched in 2018, GX Talks has already hosted many industry experts, entrepreneurs, innovators, unicorn founders, thought leaders and GovTech pioneers to create a powerful buzz about the future of government experience. GX Talks will continue to provide glimpses of the future and highlights of the integration of human beings and technology in the time to come. We thank you all for joining us today and welcome you to the next edition in the GX Talks journey. For our opening session, please welcome Chivat Yearly. Chivat created his first computer game at age 12, starting his company Crytek at age 19 was a childhood dream, one which disrupted the gaming industry with the world's first real-time 3D platform. It remains the benchmark today. Chivat now leads the Tomorrow Foundation, developing the Internet of Life to shape the future of human interactions. His talk is titled The Internet of Life. Please let's welcome him to the stage.
To be careful. Hello, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, this went a bit too fast. My name is Chivat Yearly. I'm the chairman and the CEO of the Tomorrow Foundation. I want to thank for your honorable presence. Thanks to the government of Emirates, especially the government of Dubai, under the leadership of His Royal Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid. Thanks for the opportunity to be here to share with you my vision out of my new home from Dubai. Most governments are in a very vulnerable moment when it comes to the next generation of the internet. Governments are trying to catch up as opposed to moving things forward. Many governments are helping to educate the youngest citizen whilst we are dealing with mental crisis brought to us by the pandemic, all whilst the services were largely undigitized and often digitally inaccessible. These services were provided to people that, on the other hand, were digital natives. Governments are collecting data over applications like COVID-19 or biometric passes and digital IDs. Digital IDs are used more than today physical IDs as of this year. They are doing this while the IT infrastructure is often not updated. They are not to the standard. Governments are deploying digital ministers and tech ambassadors to deal with the next generation of the internet, but they might lose control of the internet to the blockchain. Whilst some nations are pursuing digital sovereignty, nationalizing AI, and applying AI on citizens, sometimes unsettling and sometimes unknown outcomes. You governments are on your own on this. Well, it seems. But I'm here today to help you help to offer some solution on the way through my vision to fix and contribute to a better situation. 20 years ago, or in my early 20s, this is a very old photo, that's why it's so low res. In my early 20s, I created this new kind of 3D engine that would change the way people would create games. As a consequence of the revolutionary 3D technology and the games company, we were approached by government agencies early in our lifetime where they asked us to gamify services for training. Later on, my company went on to revolutionize content creation for the entire game industry and beyond. Now I'm here 20 years later, and we have entered again relationships with governments. We have entered earlier this year into a relationship with the Prime Minister Office of UAE, with the Ministry of Health and Prevention of UAE, and Emirates Health Services. The goal of these relationships is to bring a next level of government services. It is my core belief in everything I do that in my children's generation, within the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see a planet full of gamers. 6 to 9 billion people are going to play games. Pretty much everybody, sooner or later. This transformation is not a trend. It's a response to our playful nature, as games are digital manifestations of our DNA. Companies, to harness that 6 billion people's potential, we must think about how to interface them. These gamers are speaking a different language. They are not digital, they are virtual. They are not 2D or alone, they are 3D and together. So we must think about how do we interact with our everyday life and our world in a new way, in a gamified way. Governments across the world has initiated modernization efforts, such as in the US, where, according to Deloitte, US will spend $65 billion in modernizing broadband, a critical component of the next generation internet. Spain has announced $22 billion in a digital accelerator and $62 billion for public-private partnership possibilities. And South Korea has announced a $7.5 billion deal that is about digital, AI, and metaverse. And if you look closer to this, we are seeing, like Seoul, focusing on a citizen-centric metaverse. LA has announced a public metaverse for predominantly entertainment and tourism. And China has announced a bunch of them, of course, in a variety of cities. And Shanghai has promised to build a metaverse within their 5-year plan. But if you pay attention to these metaverses, they have or share most often a common problem. The common problem is, who is behind those avatars? Like, avatarization is not helping, it's counterproductive. Imagine we all had costumes around us, covering our faces. Would you know that this is me still, right? And so when you are going to the internet or to the metaverse with an avatar, that's what's happening. At the same time, the other problem that most of the metaverses share is that you have to wear cumbersome hardware that often makes you tired. And then these interfaces are complex to get in as well. Enter our vision of the Internet of Life. As we speak now, probably not, they made a pause to watch that, but as we speak now, my team is working on the next generation of the Internet, which we call Internet of Life. It is a patent pending, or patent protected in fact, technology that revolutionizes the way of connecting with people over a human-centric interaction model. This kind of approach to the metaverse changes the way citizens, governments, businesses, organizations, and entire societies will interact with each other in a completely new, emotionally deeper, and more interactive way, a human way.
Since the dawn of humankind, we've sought togetherness, solutions to shared problems. Come together to share the warmth and harness the power of fire, to channel the strength of water, to cleanse and power progress. For a better tomorrow, we need to unlock our full human potential in a world rapidly evolving to be more virtual and digitally disruptive than ever before, to break down borders, democratize spaces, empower access regardless of socioeconomics, creed, or color of skin, in a new virtual world, or metaverse, that we call the Internet of Life. We're building this new world, powered by our proprietary Reality OS technology, and you have access to it now. Teachers taught us to show and not tell. Now, we empower teachers to go, show, and tell via teleportation. Imagine the power of a virtual courtroom with true empathy and emotion. Not people trapped in a teleconference box or as an anonymous avatar. Imagine sustainable profits and location-independent government services, free from the biases often attached to the underprivileged. The Internet of Life is here, empowering governments and citizens alike to unlock a new era of opportunity for deep global connection, one that expands the horizons of real life. Join us to create a better life for our children with the Internet of Life.
Our leading customers, the Prime Minister Office of UAE, the Ministry of Health and Prevention of UAE, and the Emirates Health Services, they recognize something very important. This is the beginning of something much bigger. This is the beginning of the Internet of Life, which is a metaverse where a better planet, empowered people, and sustainable profits can coexist. The Internet of Life is about being real. It's about communication at the center. Communication, did you know that communication, 55% of it is visual? Did you know that 93% of communication is nonverbal? So if you were in an avatar, you would be minus 83% already, right? So we focused on the virtual twin of the real version of you as a way to communicate, so you have real presence. The Internet of Life is about presence. Since dawn of time, we are getting together in spaces in an organized form. It's in our DNA. We are social animals. We need to be together. Internet of Life and our technology, Reality OS, gives us a sense of togetherness, sense of social presence in a complete new way, backed by more than 200 patents It's inclusive. Inclusive is probably the most important here. It's for the 3 billion people of today, not in 10 years from now. It's about everyone in the world clicking in a browser on a link and being able to enter that experience without the need of VR. VR is expensive and cumbersome and not available widely. It's about how we disrespect, in a good way, the living room and the kitchen backgrounds you have by protecting your privacy. Also, it's about protecting your socioeconomic status and your location, and well as your background. These things are often biases that change the way people behave. It's about unlocking that potential and enabling everybody across the world to take part of economic opportunities. Accessibility and trust, it's about how we can click in one link and get inside and get a great experience. Sorry. And that experience has to be available in front of you on a desktop or a computer or VR or mobile phones. That experience is about sharing, getting information like brochures and watching videos. At the same time, calling for an agent and asking more information. Once that is over, you are good to interact yourself in the same space, or you might leave and spend physical time. All of that provided by the digital trust layer of Reality OS, which secures the communication between the government service providers, for example, and the citizen. Dubai is leading the way of the Internet of Life and the metaverse, and we are very grateful for the partnership and the relationship we have at the highest levels. I'm here today also to work with your government to provide a better situation for your citizen and to build the Internet of Life together with you. Thank you so much for listening. Shukran.
So our next speaker is Dr. Daniel Kraft. Dr. Daniel Kraft is a Stanford and Harvard-trained physician scientist and healthcare innovator. He is a well-known thought leader on the future of health and biomedicine. He serves as the faculty chair for medicine at Singularity University and chairs the X Prize Pandemic and Health Alliance. Daniel is an Aspen Health Innovation Fellow and a Kaufman Fellow. He is the founder of Exponential Medicine, Digital Health, and Continuum Health Ventures. His talk is titled Testing the Limits with Exponential Medicine. Please welcome him to the stage.
Shukran. Thank you very much. It's a great honor and pleasure to be back in UAE, in Dubai, such an exponential country and mindset. And you know, health is wealth. And we have all these incredible technologies all around us that have reshaped and disrupted, entire industries. How we do our banking, how we get our entertainment, have all shifted. Our worlds have been disrupted in good ways, and we've seen the pandemic disrupt our world in challenging ways the last couple of years. And the pandemic has helped us see that while many other technologies have reached the fourth industrial age, healthcare is sort of stuck in the second or the third industrial age. And I like to think about COVID as a bit of a catalyst. It's been the chief transformation officer. Just like Sputnik has sparked the space age, COVID is sparking a bit of a new health age, and I'm an optimist. Hopefully we'll save more lives, the innovations that come from COVID innovations than have been taken by it. So as you look into the future, what do you think about? The four walls of a hospital? Well, in this new exponential age, we're going from hospital to homespital. We're changing where and care happens. We're going from lab to laptop with how we do our research. And the research that's been accelerated in the time of COVID has brought us incredible vaccines that are saving millions of lives. But still in 2022, we're still sometimes based in the era of the fax machine. When I go back to visit Stanford, where I trained, or Mass General Hospital, we're still using paper forms, fax machines, old-fashioned mindsets. I had my own cardiac study done at Stanford. I could only get my results in a CD-ROM. I don't even own a CD-ROM player anymore, right? So the challenge is we're still stuck in the mindsets of waiting rooms and silos as they've been designed for years in healthcare. But we're not just defined by body parts. We're now in this genomic, connected, multi-omics age. How do we break open the silos? How do we help government services connect the dots to bring the potential for health and medicine to the population? Part of that's about mindset, because today we don't practice healthcare, we practice more sick care. What do I mean by sick care? Sick care is our usual model. We go and get very intermittent episodic data in the four walls of the clinic or the emergency room. And that intermittent episodic data leads to our reactive mindset. We tend to wait for the patient to show up with a heart attack or a stroke or diabetes or, in my field of oncology, a late-stage cancer. And it's our potential moving forward to take all the new amazing technologies that are here and emerging to be much more continuous with our data, much more personalized, much more proactive, and start to bring care anytime, anywhere, arguably at lower costs with better outcomes. And move the needle not just on treating disease, but precision wellness, optimizing not just our lifespan, but our health span. And to even think about extending our longevity and even reversing aging. So it's an exciting time, and I think government and government services helps catalyze this whole healthcare continuum. I'm not going to go through very quickly. Now, the future of medicine's in the zeitgeist. I wrote the opening article for National Geographic 2 years ago. And many of these emerging technologies are exponential, just like Abu Dhabi and Dubai are riding this new trend. You know, technologies at their exponential are where disruption and change happens. Moore's law is accelerating the power of computing on small chips, and soon we'll have quantum computing. But even with our magical smartphones of today, we have incredible healthcare potential, right? My iPhone 2 from 12 years ago, it was amazing 12 years ago. Now it feels slow and clunky. My iPhone 13 will soon be antique and will dissolve into my augmented reality glasses or into my smart virtual reality contact lenses, which are coming to market in the next year or two. And even with our sensors of today, we can do some pretty incredible things. We can design them to enable us to do an ear check on our kids to see if they have an ear infection, or the rise of the medical selfie. Instead of bringing your urine to the lab to check for a urinary tract infection, or for a pregnant woman, or if you're screening for a patient with diabetes for kidney problems, you can now take a picture, click the picture, the AI and the machine learning can make the diagnosis and send it to your doctor at the pharmacy right away. Instant diagnostics. So on this exponential, what used to fit on a desktop now fits on your smartwatch, which are becoming FDA-cleared medical devices. And now we have this whole digital era of health and medicine, digitized, democratized, and demonetized. And it's shifting how and where we can do things, from services to data. And I think we'll make the next 10 years look slow. Because remember, not just Moore's law, but Amar's law. We tend to underestimate what can happen in the next 2 years and overestimate the near term and underestimate the long term. And I think the next 10 years will make the last 10 years look slow. So let's together reimagine what we can all do together in this future of health and medicine. Starting with now this Internet of Medical Things, riding 5G, soon 6G, making terabytes of data from our wearables and our connected homes and our genomics, massive amounts of data, but often that data is siloed. It doesn't connect. It can create an infodemic. I think part of the role of government and new smart services is to incentivize going from big data to actionable information and insights, and to narrow the gap from learning to what can be used at the bedside or at the website. And to also align incentives, not to just pay for sick care, but to pay and reward healthy behaviors in the community, at the public schools, and at the education level. Part of the shift, of course, is incentivizing care from hospital to home, to our phones, to inside our bodies. A lot of care can now happen at your corner pharmacy, or of course on your telemedicine app. And that's giving us this era of mobile, connected, or what's often called digital health. I think of digital health as the ability to connect the dots between the data and make it useful for the individual, the policymaker, the government, the school system. And to leverage many of these new apps. 10 years ago I gave a TED Talk, The Future of Medicine. There's an app for that. We're 25,000 apps. Now there's 250,000 or more health-related apps. How do we take this era, not just think about apps and digital, but layer on AI, blockchain, nanotech, genomics, virtual reality, AI, to really bring us this future of convergence? Technology meets healthcare, creates entire new fields. And for those of you in government, provides this ability now to address many of the grand challenges we have here in Dubai and around the world, from aging populations to fragmented data to who pays and who regulates as we accelerate into this future. I've been sharing this XPRIZE Pandemic Alliance Task Force through the pandemic, and what was magical was to see over 100 NGOs, governments, startups, Fortune 50s come together to help solve for PPE, diagnostics, and testing. And to realize it's not just about technology, it's often about what's called our social determinants. Where we live is more impactful, our zip code is more impactful than our genetic code. So how do we understand our social determinants and even our digital determinants? Do people have a digital plan? Do they have high-speed access? How do we now bring 50% of the world's population online and open up access to healthcare that didn't exist in the past? We're seeing new services like in the United States, Medicare pays for Uber Health that can bring patients to clinics and nurses to bring vaccines to folks. So this Uberization of healthcare is around us. Amazon is bringing Amazon Care across the United States, at least, blending virtual and digital care. And all this, of course, is disruptive. Many companies from the past have gone bust, Kodak, for example. We want to be the disruptors, not the disruptees. We want to be Ubering ourselves before we get Kodak in healthcare and beyond. So let's look at three key areas. Let's start with health and prevention. We know that most of our diseases are actually driven by our bad behaviors: poor diet, smoking, stress, not enough exercise. Now we're in a time where we can start to measure and quantify our behaviors. I'm wearing like 5 different wearables. I'm sure many of you have them on. And these sorts of wearables can now measure almost every element of physiology and behavior, from patchables to simple Fitbits that can track a patient when they go home from a total hip replacement. Are they walking more and doing better, or walking less? If they're walking less, maybe we can intervene early. And this is going to take us from an era where many of us are data geeks. We have quantified self, our data on our phones, to quantified health, where through government services and smart data flows will interact with your clinician, enable us to optimize prevention, diagnostics, and treatment. There are now smart patches that are coming to market that can give you basically an intensive care unit level of data from a simple patch that will last a month, bringing streaming information to anybody who needs it. Blood pressure can now be done without a blood pressure cuff, and our next generation smartwatches will do blood pressure, and they'll also maybe even do blood sugar without a needle or beyond. We're going from wearables to insidables, sensors in our contact lenses underneath our skin that can transmit health information wherever we might need it. And beyond that, hearing devices, ringables, this small ring I'm wearing called the Oura Ring, all this exponential technology coming together can let me track my sleep, my health, but also, if I was a pregnant woman, could predict pregnancy early, or if I've had a COVID vaccine, can predict my response to the vaccine just from a wearable device. Other technologies are emerging to measure your breath, whether you're going on a social engagement or to track whether you might have signs of early cancer. Underwearables are coming to the market, sensors that are so cheap and available, Internet of Medical Things in your underwear bands that can help track a patient from home. And with new incentives to pay for remote patient monitoring, we can shift how and where care is being done. We can also start to measure our most important drug, food. We can measure our input, how much calories we're taking, what kind of quality of food. We can also start to measure our metabolomics with continual glucose monitors, and we can measure our outputs in more seamless ways, all right? And so that's going to take us to a future of precision nutrition, right? Optimizing based on your genome, your microbiome, your metabolome. But we don't need to wear anything today. Our invisibles, our cameras today can pick up our vital signs, our blood pressure, and share and make sense of that information. So we're entering a time now where we don't need to wear anything. Our voice can be a biomarker to neurologic health, mental health. The sound of your voice or a cough, is that a common cold or is that COVID? Wi-Fi can pick up the vital signs of 10 or more people in the same room at the same time. So whether we like it or not, our digital exhaust is being collected, our digitome. Who owns that data? Do you own that data? Does the government own the data? Does big tech own that data? How do we make and incentivize that information to flow to optimize care? How do we integrate that data into the workflow of the overworked clinician, doctor, nurse, pharmacist, who's often being burnt out by the data, and it's not smartly designed into care? So as we move forward, we now can see that we can integrate this. Our smartphones can take our digital exhaust and start to make sense of it. We're moving into an era of what I like to call predictalytics. Imagine a FICO score, integrating your sexual health, your financial health, your mental health, your data, so you have your own personalized check engine light that can give you early warning. We can already see that a wearable device can pick up who has COVID even when they're asymptomatic. So we're entering a time when we can really start to make sense of this data in new forms. But just because we have the information doesn't mean we're going to change our behavior. Behavior change is hard, so we need help with that. Digital coaches are here to match our age and our personality. They need to be designed based on age, culture, language, education level. Some of these avatars will match exactly who we need to hear from to optimize our health in this sort of virtual internet of life. Even voice can be used, whether you're 9 or 99, anyone can interact with voice to help their health care. And imagine this not so distant future, we each have our own personal health coach. We see in the mirror not just you of today, but you of the future. If you're working out, you're doing your Peloton rides, or you of tomorrow if you keep having pastries for breakfast. I can see myself today, I can see myself 1,000 donuts later. I will only have one donut, right? Or if I see that, what's gonna happen if I smoke? So this brings us to a new era of augmented, virtual, and extended reality. It's bringing us new ways to see the world for clinicians to pull complex information and make sense of that in the operating room, or to be guided step by step through different surgeries. It's bringing us new ways to educate our patients so they can engage with their own health and understand the implications of healthy or bad behaviors. it's giving us, there's my son looking at his interactive physiology. Virtual reality is not just for video games today. It's fun to put grandma on a roller coaster, but we can use virtual reality to treat pain patients, or being leveraged now to treat and use for physical therapy, for engagement and gamifying. It's shifting and reimagining surgical education. So instead of see one, do one, teach one, you go into the virtual operating room and practice until you get it right. It's changing the way we can do virtual coaching and bring expert surgeons anywhere virtually around the world. And eventually, we're going to build a bit of a Waze for clinicians, learning from thousands of procedures, making an average surgeon an expert surgeon, and going from driver assist to essentially doctor assist. We're already starting to see this era of automatic robotic surgeries come to reality. Then, of course, there's diagnostics. We want to pick up disease early, not late. Here's my own brain. It comes with color-coded AI, and the scanners are getting cheaper and more available. I had my full body MRI done in 45 minutes. In 5 or 10 years, you go to your corner pharmacy, have your entire body scanned, and the AI radiologist will give you the results. We're seeing smaller scanners that are portable. I had my own brain MRI'd while on a boat riding on the Hudson River in New York City in 5 minutes a couple of months ago. So with these new diagnostic tools, we can bring care and diagnostics anywhere. It can augment our virtual visits. It can make our stethoscope smart. It can bring an AI-powered ultrasound device that used to be $200,000 and bring it anywhere around the world, democratizing diagnostics. The laboratory in a chip can fit on our smartphones now and bring us laboratories that used to be limited to central facilities. And this can, again, democratize healthcare to places like rural Africa, where taking today's technologies can upskill and uplevel clinical care teams. Another era that's emerging is the ability to leverage our genome. The price of sequencing a genome has dropped at twice the rate of Moore's Law, from $1 million 10 years ago to basically $300 today. We can take our complex genetic information and pick the right drugs and the right doses, or understand diseases like diabetes at their genetic level, and start to build our multi-omic stacks to more precisely treat diseases like diabetes. I visited a startup here called GluCare in downtown Dubai just yesterday, being much more continuous and having much better outcomes for diabetes. Of course, we need help to do that. AI, or I like to call it IA, intelligence augmentation, is going to obviously shift how we do radiology. It's shifting how we can do colonoscopy to do smarter screening and pick up lesions that might have been missed. It's coming to build this digital twin where each of us will be modeled and we can make sense of that data to be smartest about what we individually or our communities need. And AI can do some incredible things to designing drugs. There's a company called Insilico that's coming to UAE that is now in less than a year screen for, designed, and put into clinical trials drugs discovered by artificial intelligence. And of course, this won't replace the doctor, the nurse, the pharmacist. It's AI together with what humans can do that up-level and upskill all of us. Then, of course, there's therapy. All sorts of new ways of doing vaccine patches, for example, instead of needles and syringes. We're seeing virtual visits. Of course, you've all had your first virtual visits in the time of COVID, but now that's moving into the metaverse, where we'll interact with our clinical teams in ways that feel real instead of just on the screen. We're in a time of prescribing apps instead of just drugs. There's a whole new realm of digital therapeutics that are FDA cleared. And because there's so many of these tools today, I built a new platform called Digital.Health, where you can have a digital formulary for your doctors, your healthcare systems, to discover what might work. You might want to prescribe a connected EKG case to screen a patient who has heart disease. All these technologies need to be integrated into the flow and be paid for by the policymakers and payers. And my new venture fund is seeing incredible new entrepreneurs come into the healthcare space and innovate. Finally, there's now digital manufacturing, 3D printing. You can 3D print medical devices. You might even 3D print medications. Instead of taking 5 medications, what if you could print your own personalized polypill, one that's built for you and based on your own physiology? Instead of one size fits all, you can blend and match the pill that's based on the medications and the doses you need, and eventually print that at home to give you the doses and therapy for prevention, wellness, or disease therapy. So in closing, all these technologies are great, but unless they can get through clinical trials and prove their value, it's a bit of a so what. So in the time of COVID, we've been reinventing clinical trials. The digital trial is here, leveraging wearables, new forms of data, cloud analytics, and can accelerate what used to take 10 years and bring it down to 10 months. So our future is crowdsourced, just like our driving. Imagine 15 years ago, we used to drive with paper maps. Now we're building the Waze for healthcare, the Google Maps. We're all sharing data, but can bring it together. And government services can help incentivize each of us not to just be a blood donor or an organ donor, but to be a data donor. And if we take that exponential mindset, convergent thinking, We have the opportunity not to think about where we are in 2022, but to skate where the puck is going to be in 2032 and 2072 and your 100-year jubilee, to really reshape health and medicine in new ways, to go from our today intermittent reactive sick care to a future that's continuous, proactive, personalized, anytime, anywhere, crowdsourced, AI-enhanced with aligned incentives and workflow. So let's together not take incremental steps, let's take exponential steps. Just like we see here in UAE and the Dubai, the future's already here, just not evenly distributed. It's up to all of us not to just predict that future of health and medicine, but collaboratively together create it to build a better health and medicine for all of us here on Spaceship Earth. Thanks very much.
And now for our next speaker, Mr. Fuad Mansour Sharaf. Fuad is the Managing Director of the UAE Shopping Mall at Majid Al Fatim Properties. And my favorite mall, of course, Mall of the Emirates, where I do most of my shopping there. Responsible for devising long-term operational strategies to ensure the growth and success of all shopping mall businesses, unit assets in the UAE. He began his career at the Dubai Department of Economic Development and earned his stripes in 2002 as head of the Department Quality and Productivity Center. During this period, he supervised and led a variety of programs, including the Dubai Human Development Award, Dubai Service Excellence Scheme, and the Dubai Quality Award. His talk is titled, Great Moments for Everyone, Every Day. Please welcome him to the stage.
Let's make sure no rains, please. Thanks for inviting me today, actually. It's very difficult, actually, to come and talk after someone who studied in Harvard with that much of slides. Unfortunately, I have no slides, and I was about to change my mind and leave, but they told me you're still considered as an acceptable student. So I would like to share my experience, actually, in the government and the private sector. I was lucky, actually, to spend 8 years in the government sector and around 17 years in the private sector. Please focus on the presentation. Leave the age on aside. Don't do the calculation. I'll tell you my age later. So for me, actually, when I decided to join the government in 1996, it was a revolution time for the government, honestly speaking, because there were like lots of changes taking place in the government sector. And that was the time where the mindset change took place, plus lots of initiative came out of the government, specifically government of Dubai and generally the government of the UAE. I remember overnight a decision was made, actually, to remove all the counters, and the counters like used to be this, like more than a meter, with a glass and with a very tiny access to the customers to interact with the employees. So that was, I mean, in 1996. And overnight, there was a decision made to remove all these counters, eliminate them, and remove all the doors for all the CEOs and the directors and everybody to give a better access for the employee. So this is the mindset of the government of the UAE. Receiving people, listening to them, and this has been like since this country was established, and everybody is aware about the Majlis of His Highness Sheikh Rashid, Allah ghafir lahu warhamah, Zayed bin Sultan, like all of them, they had an open door policy. So that was the decision. At 1998, there was something interesting, actually. There was a launch of the Dubai Government Excellence Award. And I was lucky to be part of that award at that time. We were 4 people, by the way, working on that award at that time. It was, again, a mindset change and a shift in the government towards becoming service-oriented instead of becoming authorities where they control things. So the idea was about different criteria related to customer service, human capital, leadership, and I was lucky also to be part of the team who was promoting the award at that time. Today, I think the award became a program, and it's very successful, and I believe that the government did benefit from that. The awkward situation actually in the UAE, it's opposite than many other countries. Usually the private sector sits as a benchmark for the government, but the case in UAE is totally different. The government sets the benchmark, and the rest are like followers. So for me, we are really amazed with what government of the UAE is doing from all aspects: technology, platforms, data. I mean, anything related to getting the government evolved and reaching to the extreme, actually. Let me take you towards my experience. I have lots of stories when it comes to the government sector, but let me take you, because of the time limitation, let me take you towards my experience with Majid Al Futtaim. My experience with Majid Al Futtaim, I've joined the company in 2004, and I used to run City Center Deira. At that time, I was given the opportunity to become the GM operation of the mall. And I mean, since that time, we had always the desire to serve our customers and make them part of our journey. So Mr. Majid Al Futtaim once was asked, Allah ghafir li warhamah, he was asked, what is your dream? He said, my dream is to create great moments for everyone, every day. It's a very simple sentence, by the way. But when you look at it in depth, you will realize what is behind it. So for him, like receiving customers on a daily basis in our shopping malls is like to make them happy. I mean, it's no more about meeting their expectations, by the way. If you don't exceed their expectation, you don't exist in this market anymore. So for us, we just wanted to go one step even forward by being proactive. Again, I want to share one more experience actually I had in the shopping mall business, which is really beneficial. Like being or relying on consultants and getting feedback, looking at the NPS scores and the results, these are all interesting information. But when you become like part of that team who serves the customer, you will realize something totally different. So I had to enjoy my experience being part of the customer service team. I dedicated a day once a week just to spend that day with the customer service desk in the afternoon. So I've learned a lot. I don't have the knowledge they do actually, because they know the stores better than me. They know the categories and they know like everything in depth. But I used to listen to the stories, because you come across lots of customers frustrated, happy, rewarding you, criticizing you, looking for certain brands. So it's not an easy job, by the way. So for me, it was a great learning at that time. From there, actually, today we're talking about Mall of the Future. And what's the idea behind Mall of the Future? Mall of the Future is like more about collaborating with our customers. So today, the Mall of the Future won't be built with our assumption and what we think. I mean, that used to be the previous experience. But today, if the customers, if the end users didn't participate in like building the Mall of the Future, you won't be relevant to the market anymore. So that's why we have recently, actually, we've launched the big vote, the big city center vote. And we have opened all the platform for our customers to come and to give us their votes and share with us their experience from all aspects. We're not limiting them only to come and talk to us about certain brands. We're going even further by allowing them to decide on the promotions, on the activities they want to see in the mall, on the rewarding scheme, for example, on the leasing part, on the operation. in all aspects related to the business. So for us, we believe that this is a golden opportunity for us to hear our customers and to do whatever they are looking for, because the mall is built for them, is not built for us. Because if we'll keep pretending and assuming what the customer wants without interacting with them, we won't reach there. So, I mean, for us as a business, it's becoming very critical, and it's becoming very difficult. It's not an easy task, but on a daily basis, we're working towards actually enhancing the customer experience. Just one more point, actually. It's about like our relation also with our tenants. So previously, we used to have a very standard relations with our tenants where they sign a contract, which is the lease, and they become like a tenant with us in the mall. But today, I think the relation is beyond that element, actually. So they are partners with us in our business. So it's a long journey. We need to work with them, provide them with the right platform for them to operate and make money. So that's the whole objective. And I hope I won't take much time, actually. I'm crossing almost the time, so thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah. Our next speaker is Mr. Guy-Philippe Goldstein, named one of France's top 100 cyber talents. Goldstein is an analyst and a consultant on cyber defense and cyber power. He is a lecturer at the School of Economic Warfare in Paris and an advisor to PwC and Exponent Capital. His talk is titled The Future of Cyber at the Intersection of Imagination and New Capabilities. Please, let's welcome him to the stage.
Thank you. So, hello to all. Very grateful to be here today. As stated, my name is Guy Goldstein. I'm a lecturer actually on cyber power at the School of Economic Warfare in Paris. And also, I happen to write speculative fictions. Digital governments today have become critical to provide key services, but what happens when things don't work as planned? Well, that was one of the things I've tried to explore in my debut novel, Babel Minute Zero. I started to write it in 1996 and then published it in 2007. And in it, I tried to envision a future conflict between China and the US for the control of Taiwan and taking place in large part in cyberspace. The novel got a bit of traction among national security professionals in France, in the US at MIT, and actually especially in Israel. To it, former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, just a couple of weeks ago at CyberTech conference in Tel Aviv, did mention the impact this novel had had on him when thinking about that topic about 10 years ago. And I thought there was this question of cyber power, and actually, could cyber conflicts destabilize international relations? And so this led me to a TEDx talk, and then to a supposedly more serious paper with the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv in 2013, where I applied Professor Robert Jarvis' security dilemma model to cyber weapons. Because cyber weapons give the perception of an advantage to the attacker, and because cyber capabilities, men, software, computers, can be used either to attack or to defend, when you apply Robert Jarvis' model to cyber weapons, then you enter the quadrant which is top left, which is the world that is the most dangerous, the doubly dangerous world, the most conducive to a collapse like World War I. And actually, the late Professor Robert Jarvis published a paper in 2020 where he indeed stated that cyber could make the world much more unstable. So that's the theory. Okay, great. But actually, where are we today? We haven't seen such a big collapse from cyber weapons. And actually, if you look at recent news, we haven't seen such a big manifestation of cyber power. So, well, maybe I was totally wrong, and not alone, by the way. And what are the prospects now if we move 10, 15 years from now? So let's try to do a bit of a trip into the world 10, 15 years from now. And there are a couple of important revolutions here. The first one, which is actually a revolution that surprisingly I don't hear that much, is that of a world fully robotic in 10, 20 years from now, as the price of industrial-grade robots will collapse. We will be surrounded by smart, autonomous machines. And this, in turn, will greatly facilitate not just virtual, but actual physical shocks from cyber attacks. And what will be at stake will not be just money, but actual physical damages and people's lives. Meanwhile, computing power will continue to increase, perhaps multiplying by a factor of 1,000 in the next 10, 15 years, as we've seen in the last few decades. So tomorrow's drones and nanobots will be much smarter, far smarter, and able to achieve very complex maneuvers. For example, hiding and physically inserting infected USB key or equivalent into computer systems. So that's another example that you will not be able to detach yourself from cyberspace. You will not escape from cyberspace. And then, another revolution, AI, with better audio, video imitation, with natural language processing, and with personality models. All these will fuse and will create avatars that can easily succeed at the so-called Turing test. You know the test when you're talking to a machine, and actually you can't even understand. You're thinking that you're talking to an actual human being, and it's not, it's a machine. So, in all the metaverse that you heard about and the social networks, you will have swarms of these Turing avatars that will be able to reach in an industrialized fashion any target on any circles, may that be professional, friendly circles, family, or even romantic circles. And then apply multiple psychological effects, either seducing, or persuading, or angering, or destabilizing, or even simply blackmailing and recruit. Such cognitive attacks could either carpet bomb whole segments of population, or micro-target senior individuals, or critical companies. And this could lead to a fatal collapse of trust in cyberspace. Another revolution looms, facilitated by the sensors of a machine we just talked about. With sensors everywhere, we will build the so-called virtual models of factories, engines, cities, and perhaps even human organization, provided we have advanced cognitive models. But then, if everything becomes transparent and can be turned into a faithful model, then finding new vulnerabilities and attacks paths will be much easier. More attacks will become more operational in military terms. And this will transform Jarvis model. Till now, it is hard to actually physically break big things from the virtual world. And we have seen actually in the last 5 years, a couple of ambitious nation states trying to do cyber sabotage and failing. And indeed, if you have a cyber weapon that has a low probability of success, it may be of use for psychological effects, okay? But then it will not be the spearhead of your military campaign. But if now you have a very faithful model of the world that you can target, your attack will have a much higher chance of success. And if you press the red button, then the decision makers, the political leaders, will be much more interested. And then you have a high-performing offensive weapon, and now you're back in the doubly dangerous world. So in the next 3 minutes, I'll try to explain how we can actually save ourselves from that. First, we'll have to change paradigm, and government will be very important for that. At the personal level, no more implicit trust. Whenever you hear, for example, Guy Philippe on the phone, okay? If you don't have a smartphone next to you validating the authentication of Guy Philippe, just don't do that guy, okay? It will be dangerous. It's always dangerous, by the way. At the industrial level, because now we will be dealing with corporal damages and human lives, the security investment will have to change by an order of magnitude. By the way, it's not sci-fi, there's a model for that. That's called the airline industry, where a large part of investment in safety and security has been devoted, and still, it makes money. Look at Emirates. So that may be the business model metaphor for lots of industrial sectors in the 10, 15 years to come. And then, one thing you should not forget at any level is redundant technologies that can be kept in case of crisis. Okay, all techs, of course, are not efficient, right? But in crisis, when nothing works, they can temporarily do the job. And this is the reason why, for example, the US Senate has commissioned an experiment in 2019 to maintain redundant electromechanical control system in the US electrical grid, just in case something happens. Another point, an important one, facing the collaborative space that is the dark net with very bad guys, there'll be also a need to further increase cooperation networks, what we could collectively call our own white net. Especially since the name of the game is to cycle information quicker than the enemy and to always be one step ahead of him. Allied states need to continue improve information sharing between them, but also with private institutions, private cybersecurity operators, and private entities. Why? Cyber conflicts are not happening in vast plains where large armies owned by nation states are going to confront themselves. No. They actually happen inside companies, in the very fabric of value creation and human activities. And that's why there'll be a need for better understanding of financial incentive and constraints for each parties to better cycle information. By the way, just one thing, but large global cloud providers may actually be a large part of this new white net. And finally, an ultimate twist. Winston Churchill said during World War II that truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. Well, this can also apply to cyber warfare. The virtual digital twin synthetic world can also create elaborate deception to protect actual networks. Cyber criminals then will waste time and energy attacking fake targets inside the defensive perimeter of a defender. Even better, fake targets can be poisoned. All of a sudden, each attempt to attack could backfire against the hacker. This could reverse the advantage in favor of the attacker, and this also could be a game changer. And thus, at stake, with all these pro-defensive hints, perhaps the possibility to reverse Jarvis' model, to move this time to a doubly stable world based on the dominance of the defense. And if what's at stake is peace and stability, then you know what? It should be tried. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Dr. Jonathan Recantal, one of the earliest mentors for our GX program. Dr. Jonathan Recantal is a multiple award-winning technology and business leader whose career has spanned both the private and public sector. His talk is titled A Time Machine to 2050. Let's buckle up and take this journey with him. Thank you.
Okay, so we know change is happening, but what kind of change is happening? We're in the start of a revolution. We're living through revolution. What that means is the world that enters the revolution is very different from the world after the revolution. Are you ready for it? Are you ready? Are you ready? Right? What does that look like? What does that look like in terms of technology, in terms of our lives? Well, I'm going to explore that a little bit. Thank you. I get 2 microphones. When technology happens in this new revolution, this 4th industrial revolution, the scope will be greater. It'll impact more people on day one. It'll have greater impact. By the way, we think of impact as potentially positive, but that impact could be bad too, at scale, right? And it'll happen fast. You know it's happening fast. We can see it here, happening almost in real time. And whilst things like artificial intelligence and data and blockchain, all these things are important, what happens when they come together? That's when the real magic happens. That's what we call convergence. But I'm actually not here to talk about these things or even the 4th Industrial Revolution. I just want to set the context for change. What I want to talk about is the future of cities. Because the greatest manifestation of all the change that's going to happen is going to be in our cities. Fixing our cities, building great cities, is going to be the grand challenge of the 21st century. 3 million people move into cities every week. We build the equivalent of New York City every single month. And by the way, we'll do that for the next 30 years. Cities are pretty important. If we're going to solve things like climate change and other things, it's going to happen inside our cities. Now, this is not an abstract concept, right? Because when you drove here or you drove to drop your kids off at school, no matter where you are in the world, you're going to see things like bad transportation. The automobile has served us pretty good, for about 100 years? I think we're in the negative territory right now. You know, sitting in traffic, for me, for example, to go to work when I used to go to work, was an hour to go 12 miles. I would call that a system that's broken, that needs to be fixed. And in our cities of hyper-consumerism, which has benefited a large amount of people, and by the way, cities have been successful. They are the most important, most successful things that human beings have actually ever invented. They have served more people and brought more people out of extreme poverty than just about anything else we've ever created. But there is a negative side to it. Here now in the 21st century, there's a little bit of a hangover, right, that we have to solve. For example, our air isn't clean. The World Health Organization says that about 8 million people die, directly or indirectly, because of air quality. And it's mostly happening inside our cities. The 800-pound gorilla in the room is that our behavior, if you believe the scientific consensus, which, by the way, I do, has changed the climate radically. And where it rains, it'll rain more. And where it's dry, it'll be drier. And when there's hurricanes, the hurricanes will be worse and more frequent. We're dealing with this right now. This isn't a problem of tomorrow or 20 or 30 years from now. Our future belongs to cities. A child born today will most likely be born in a city, will live in a city, will get a job in a city, and live out their lives in a city context. So we better pay attention to this, right? Over the next 28 years, which is all we have between now and 2050, great change will happen. And we have opportunities in our cities to do great things. Now, I always say, I do this work because it's the right thing to do. Building better cities to make a better quality of life is the right thing to do. But you could also do it and do well from it. Make money. Create economic opportunities. The studies show now that those cities that participate in building a better life for their people, over the next decade, will generate $20 trillion of new economic value. That's a trillion with a T. Our cities will be hyper-connected. Now, we're still, by the way, only about 50 to 58% of the world on the internet. We still have several billion more to connect. But we'll eventually get to the highest amount of people we can connect because there will only ever be, by the way, about 11 billion people, because after 11 billion people, the number starts to come down. Our future problem isn't overpopulation, it's underpopulation. That's beyond 2050, by the way. But connecting things, connecting devices in our cities to do things like detect air quality or the availability of good water, that'll require sensorization of our communities. Today, there's about 45 billion things connected to the internet. 40, there's no upper limit to this. And by 2025, which is less than 3 years away, about 75 billion things will be connected. Now, you could do the math on that. What is that, like 2.5 years, whatever? Let's round it to 3 years, about 30 billion. That's 10 billion a year. It's about 1 billion devices every single month will be added to the internet. 20% of that will be in our cities. Cities are the biggest users of the Internet of Things, right? It's not just about selling devices. The hardware is a great opportunity, sure. If you want to build some sensors, there's a great opportunity here. But it's about the software, the services, connectivity, new ideas, new solutions. And we are connecting our cities. We're connecting our lights. So our lights can go on only when there's people around. Isn't it a great waste that street lights are on when nobody's there? We can fix that. Sensors can fix that, right? Our cars will be connected. Our cars, you know that already. Lots of our cars are already connected, right? But the story about cars is much greater than connecting cars over the next 28 years or so. Let me make some big, bold statements, and I'll come back here in 2015, and you can tell me if I was right or not. The first thing is, if you have a child in your life, or you're about to have a child, or you know a child, say the child is 6 months old or 1 year old, that child will probably never have a driver's license. That child will probably never have a car. I think that's a good thing. Eventually, likely within a few decades, it will be illegal for human beings to drive. Right? People don't like to hear that. They always say to me, well, what happens if I like to drive? Well, you'll drive on the weekend. You can't ride a horse down the highway that's beside my house. You can't do that today, but I could ride a horse on the weekend. Okay. Cars, in fact, the movement from from driving vehicles to autonomous vehicles, analysts are now projecting could be the biggest economic boom the world has ever seen. It's a pretty bold statement, wouldn't you say? Right? Why do I say that? In 2007, Steve Jobs got on the stage at Apple in Cupertino in California, just down the street from my house, and he announced the iPhone. It's an amazing day. I remember it vividly, and you can watch it on YouTube. I encourage you to have a look at it. It's still an amazing speech. And he talks about, the fact that the phone is going to be a communicator, an internet device, and a couple of other things. What he doesn't talk about are apps, really. But in the years following 2007, we built millions of apps. We created millions of businesses worth billions of dollars. In the app stores today, whether you have a Google phone or an Android or an Apple, there are millions of applications that did not exist in 2007. Here we are in 2022 at GX Talks at Expo. I'm telling you, there is no app store for self-driving cars yet. But there will be. And we will create millions of self-driving vehicle apps. Will you create one of them? Will you create that business? We have to replace all the cars in the world. If I'm not mistaken, there are billions of cars in the world that will get replaced over the next few years, and all the infrastructure that goes with it. This will be a revolution at scale that we have never experienced before over the next 30, 40 years and beyond. Now, often people say to me, Jonathan, what's going to be the most incredible tech of the next few years? And they're surprised when I say, maybe bicycles. That doesn't seem pretty high tech, but it's pretty revolutionary, right? Communities and cities all over the world are looking at bicycles as a game changer, and they're changing communities. Great for health. Great for health. So is walking, by the way. We have to make more walkable communities. Now, as we create our wonderful new mega cities like Dubai and other places, our appetite for energy is not going down, right? We need more and more of energy to power those big screens and all the incredible beauty and wonder of our mega cities that we're building all the time. We need a lot of power, and we're in the starting years of an energy revolution. This is the right place to talk about this, I think. Right? Today it's wind, but you know, tomorrow the big winner, we believe, is going to be solar. We're in the opening years of an energy revolution that's going to change the very nature of the world. Our cities are the grand project of the 21st century, and they'll be a big part of the next 28 years as we go towards 2050. You might not have thought of cities in this way, but we can build beautiful, engaging, healthy, walkable, cyclable cities like what's happening in Paris as it gets transformed. And we can build brand new cities in the ocean and on the land that use resources in completely new ways and create lives that are healthier, more meaningful, and give meaning to people's lives, right? So as I wrap up here, you might think, well, what's next? What should happen next? Well, that's a question for you. That's a question for you. Because what matters is what you do and what I do, right? You have to ask yourself, what's your role? How can I be a game changer? How can I create this world that I would love? How can I create this world that I would like to give to my children? That's the question for all of us. Not for me or the technologists, but our behaviors and the things we want. That will drive the next 28 years and the years ahead. And I just leave you with a question. I leave you with a question. What will you do? What will each of you do to create a smarter and more sustainable future for tomorrow? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Rashid Al-Falahi, with little over 14 years of progressive experience in providing critical oversight and insight to key government stakeholders on approaches to communicate and advocate critical issues across the UAE. Through effective communication techniques, especially in atomic energy and nuclear matters, Rashid is the first Emirati researcher in the field of narrative and future storytelling, with focus on the growing importance of chief storytelling in organizations. His talk is titled Stories for the Future, Experiencing Government Services Through Storytelling. Please welcome him.
Thank you very much. Once the water started falling from the ceiling, I got nervous, so I started playing Candy Crush, and I felt a little bit better. But speaking about wearables, Mr. Daniel, as I was sitting, we spent almost an hour sitting, my wearable told me to stand up because it knows that it's not good to sit for a very long time. So to reset your systems, can I please ask you all to stand up for a while and sit down again, please? Thank you very much. This is why technology is good. This is why we have to make the most out of it. So, COVID-19 has just hit the world. Please have a seat. We are in a frenzy of chaos with a fear of the unknown. Amidst the sea of false information, the government wants to raise awareness on the Minister of Health directives. Imagine that you have been tasked to educate the public on the need to observe these regulations. One great way of achieving this is to present data and statistics on the scare death toll and infection rates globally. Alternatively, you would present these ideas using the real stories of people that have been affected. Which amongst the two options would be more persuasive? Research has shown that the public composed of all walks of life will remember the story way better after the data and figures become blurry. In my experience as a storyteller and futurist, I have come to know that this is nothing but the truth. As a keynote speaker, I'm always faced with the challenge of delivering my content in an interesting and captivating manner. I soon realized that the story is a powerful tool that creates a deep connection with the audience to create social change. Storytelling is an ancient practice that is as old as the human race. Stories have shown to capture and broaden attention, increasing the likelihood of hearing and learning. Today, I'm here to show you the power and evolution of future stories and how they can be incorporated into government services. Why does a future story work? A future story can harness the world's most potent engine of possibilities, imagination. It disarms skeptics in a way that no statistic or analysis can. Facts are meaningless without a contextual story. My audience often switch off whenever I pull out graphs and charts with endless figures. The minute I shift their attention to a story, they visibly come back to life. And the satisfaction that comes with understanding and expressed in their keenness is relatable. Stories can be memorable, impactful, and personally connecting. They easily engage, influence, teach, and inspire listeners. This concept can be explained by exploring the science behind storytelling. Essentially, storytelling introduces the brain to release hormones. Why does that matter? If we are trying to make a point stick, the hormone cortisol assists with our formulating memories. The hormone dopamine, which helps regulate our emotional response, keeps us engaged, just like now. When it comes to creating deeper connections with the audience, the hormone oxytocin is associated with empathy, an important element in deepening and maintaining good relations with people. The science of storytelling reveals how storytelling effective activity leading to a greater impact. A concept called neural coupling occurs when a story activates a part in your brain that allows the listener to turn the story into their own ideas and experiences. On the other hand, mirroring occurs where listeners form a connection to each other and to the speaker by experiencing a similar brain activity. Now, the personal connection we feel when hearing a story relates to some interesting neuroscience. When presented with data and facts, two areas of the brain are activated, the one that takes in the information and the one that processes it. However, storytelling makes multiple areas in our brain work, making the brain more receptive to stories than it is to statistics. So this explains the alertness we experience when we listen to stories. Our brain actually can't tell the difference between hearing a story and experiencing it. Because of that personal connection, we become deeply emotionally attached. Emotion appeals to our senses, influencing the audience strongly. Therefore, storytelling creates long-lasting impressions. The audience will recognize, decode, and grasp your point quickly, and the feeling you conjure up will linger and have an impact on a larger scale. That's why gossip and propaganda sell so well and spread like wildfire. Interesting, right? But how does this relate to government services? It might feel like stories waste time and resources, but stories actually have the power to change our perceived value of something. Emotional connection triggers action, thus influencing human behavior. This ultimately leads to desired change. Government services can use storytelling to influence people positively and create the desired change for effective persuasion. To harness the power of storytelling, we need to understand how to tell stories of the future. Our ancestors communicated through ancient cave drawings by craftsmen. Oral traditions took over to pass information from one generation to another through word of mouth in the form of epic poetry, myths, chants, and songs. At the turn of the century, technological advances made it possible to write, print, and type stories. And now, centuries later, we are faced with multiple possibilities of storytelling: visual stories, photographs, spoken stories, and videos, and recordings and written words on blogs and statuses, etc. What could be the impact of future stories? Clearly, good storytelling is a hallmark of effective leadership. For future stories, we can utilize indirect experiences, mentally rehearsing how we might handle a situation before we have to face it. I remember the first time I learned how to ride a bicycle. I was young, excited, and determined. I still carry the scars that I endured as I was a kid, as I lose my balance while pedaling. Years later, I made a few more mistakes by learning how to ride a car. I have a scar on my neck. And now I yearn to learn how to fly jets. My fear of making a fatal mistake over flying a plane, of course, scares me. However, I came to learn that pilots actually fly their first jets without ever leaving the ground, complete with the associated motion sickness. This is made possible by groundbreaking inventions, virtual reality, for instance, and augmented reality. In the same way, you will not just devour narratives from a book, watching a movie, or listen to an audiobook. In the future, you would be standing in the middle of them. How? Virtual reality, of course. Virtual reality allows it. Virtual reality films are extremely vivid, creating a perception of depth, smell, vision, and sound. Whenever I want to have a good time with my kids, I find virtual reality very exciting. Sometimes the kids and I are filled with the sense of awe, and sometimes I can hear their screams due to the perceived reality, due to virtual reality's reality. I must admit that I have had some unsettling emotions myself in many instances. How many of us have had the chance to experience the virtual reality experiences in augmented reality? This technology is new, but most people are yet to experience it. But in the future, the technology will take a center stage in determining how stories are told. It will take storytelling to a whole new level, making them more multi-sensory and physically interactive. Perhaps you're wondering why this is a game changer for government services. Well, perceiving the characters in the story like real people creates empathy. How can governments take advantage of this evolution of the stories of the future? Through three main ways: gamification, community engagement, and accelerated innovation. Networking stories can be incorporated into government services through gamification. Most of us that have experienced virtual reality have done some through gaming. The government can encourage social participation by a friend-like competition with the end goal of improving its relationship with the public. Who doesn't want some fun? We play too much as it is, and the government can tap into our competitive nature to engage the public. But the question is how? Games are fun, engaging, and interesting. Gamification introduces game mechanics into government services to engage participation, inspire collaboration, and foster interaction. Some of the main elements include competition, reputation, social interaction, cooperation, rewards, levels, badges, progress bars, and rankings. These act as intrinsic or extrinsic motivation to influence social change. The government can push people toward positive behavior through subtle influence of the games. For instance, to encourage civic engagement, games can be used and empower members of the public to voice their concern in exchange for reward. And another example, to unify the people by bringing them together through gaming, thus fostering the community spirit. The best starting point for documenting such gamification would be through the government e-services. How else can government services benefit from the future of storytelling? Picture this: the Prime Minister sitting right next to you and addresses you directly on an issue of national concern, explaining why he made this certain choice. This creates a form of intimacy, as if you are having a conversation. In the spirit of democratization, Such activity will enable community engagement in government services. Stories can be used to accelerate innovation in the public sector and create engagement and participation. Stakeholders from different sectors can provide us with perspectives by sharing stories and perception of the future of their communities, as well as the needs and the priorities. This can guide decision makers and thought leaders on the services they want to prioritize. You may ask, why should we prioritize community engagement in government services? The simple answer is unity. We want to bring people together despite their individual differences, create safer environments, share common goals, and prioritize the immediate needs of the community. What better way to achieve this than to share stories of the future we hope to create? Through Open Communication Challenge, local people can express their ideas and opinions to the leaders and thought leaders to ensure the presentation. Stories open up simple, relatable avenues for increased participation to ensure more voices are heard. They contribute to social change and policy reforms due to the power to shape and improve their lives. Share stories build trust, cultivate norms, and create emotion connections, making it easy to transfer knowledge while learning and unlearning. The government can create alternative futures through storytelling and stories of the future leading creativity and innovation. We all know that innovation calls for change, which we hate most of the time. We love the status quo so much that our instinctive reaction to change, neither positive or negative, is resistance. Storytelling has been used as the icebreaker to increase cooperation in the past and even present. As technologies advance and storytelling evolves, we can tell stories in more impactful manner for mutual reality. Stories become real and more reasonable as if we are experiencing them firsthand. This can be used to communicate with the public and executive officials as well as the public to accelerate innovation. The technology acceptance model offers a good guideline on how people perceive innovation. Besides perceived innovation, external variables influence the attitude towards innovation, as well as the intention to use actual units of the innovation. And the digital era, it is not enough to tell a good story. We are bombarded with millions of stories out there, creating a battle of attention. Therefore, the government must position itself strategically when incorporating future storytelling in its services for increased effectiveness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next guest is Mr. Ronald Menzel. Ronald is a serial entrepreneur and activist who has dedicated his life to imagining innovative projects where cutting-edge technology is used to create out of the ordinary customer's experience. He co-founded Dreamscape, where he aims to introduce the next major platform shift in cinematic storytelling for applications such as entertainment, education, or simulation. His talk title is From Hollywood to the Metaverse: How Science Fiction Movies Predict the Future. Time to tighten your seatbelt now. Please welcome him to the stage.
Hello, so I'm the co-founder of Dreamscape. Dreamscape has its roots in Hollywood. And we are at the intersection of, if you want, movies and theme parks. We're bringing people in the future worlds. The buzzword of 2022 is the metaverse. Let me just take my take on, or the take of science fiction, of Hollywood on this buzzword. So first of all, as this is almost the last talk of the evening, let's make it a little bit fun. Let's make a game out of that. I'm going to offer a coffee to the person that is going to come after the conference and list all the movies I'm making a reference to. It can be images or it can be citations. So obviously the first one is easy. Why do I make a reference to the most famous cocktail of Hollywood? Well, I'm just going to use the same tricks as Hollywood does, which means suspense, and I'm only going to give you this answer at the end. But let me start by telling you how a movie changed my life. And I've done a lot of very different things in my life. I started in music production. Then when I was studying economics, I promised myself that I would never work in a bank, never work in a multinational company, never work in a German company, and guess what? I ended up at Deutsche Bank. I created at the beginning of internet e-commerce. And then after that, I retired the corporate world and I sailed around the seas. I created NGOs for the protection of the oceans. I did crazy projects. Actually, one crazy project happened here in Dubai when I brought an eagle at the top of Burj Khalifa with a camera on its back, and it was flying over Dubai and broadcasting live these images all around the world. More than 1 billion people saw that. I was asking myself, okay, what is the common denominator of all these things that I've done? And I think it has been how technology can improve user experience. I think this is something very important. So now, how did I get into VR? Two of my good friends developed a new technology and one day came and told me, okay, you need to see that. Okay, so I went to their studio, put a VR headset on, put some markers on my hands and on my feet, and suddenly I stepped into the tomb of Tutankhamun. I was not only seeing it, but I could walk, I could touch things, like literally touch things, take objects. And for me, this was amazing. At that time, I was creating a company, had spent a lot of time, a lot of money into it. I took off my headset, and literally in 10 seconds I said, well, I need to leave everything I've done so far behind and get into that, because it's the only time in my life where I'm going to be able to be at the beginning of a technology that I believe is going to change the world. I literally felt I stepped into the future. Let me show you this moment. This was the wow moment. So this looks like nothing, but imagine you have a VR headset, so this means you're blind. You're catching a torch, you're throwing a torch, and someone else can catch it. This is pretty amazing, because from now you can see that you can project digital environments on the real world. All right, now a fast forward to Dreamscape. Steven Spielberg was filming or was preparing Ready Player One, and he asked his team to look in the real world, what were the companies that were developing that kind of technologies. So that's how he found us. And at the same time, we were at Sundance, and we met two people that became our co-founders. And actually, it happened that one of them ran DreamWorks with Spielberg for 15 years. And this is how Dreamscape was born. So for the last 6 years, I've learned a lot working in Hollywood. I've learned a lot also about how media works, how media can create buzz. I think that the metaverse is clearly one of the buzz. And I think it's more like a normal evolution of technology, but we need to have new things to focus on every year. And if you look at Hollywood, the movie that illustrates the best the metaverse is Ready Player One. And for the people here that have not seen it, I'm just going to show a short extract of this movie.
My name's Wade Watts. My dad picked that name because it sounded like a superhero's alter ego, like Peter Parker or Bruce Banner. But he died when I was a kid, my mom too. And I ended up here. Sitting here in my tiny corner of nowhere. There's nowhere left to go. Nowhere. Except the oasis. whole virtual universe. People come to the Oasis for all the things they can do. But they stay because of all the things they can be. Yeah. It's the only place that feels like I mean anything. The Oasis was the brainchild of James Halliday.
Hello. If you're watching this, I'm dead. I created a hidden object, an Easter egg. The first person to find the egg will inherit $500 billion and total control of the Oasis itself.
Who is this Parzival, and how the hell is he winning?
Find him. This isn't just a game. I'm talking about actual life and death stuff.
The Oasis, the world's most important economic resource. It's nothing less than a war for control of the future.
Welcome to the rebellion, Wade.
Like many of you, I only came here to escape. But I found something much bigger than just myself. Are you willing to fight?
Help us save the Oasis.
Pretty cool movie if you have not seen it. Now think about some of the iconic movies of Hollywood. 2001: Space Odyssey, RoboCop, Terminator, Ex Machina, Her, Truman Show. Well, all these movies and all the vision of Hollywood on our future is that technology controls our lives. It's not technology that is basically at the service of our lives. Is it the future we want? I don't really want to live in this world. But the good thing is that Hollywood works in black and white, and the real world is a bit more nuanced than that. So as with technological evolution, we're always afraid by new things. But think about our parents that told us, okay, don't watch television, you're going to become blind. Or we told our children that they should not play video games, they would become completely disconnected. I think at the end, we're finding the right model. But now, we have the same with the metaverse. And will Ready Player One become this new reality? I really hope not. This would be a pretty horrible world where we would be in this kind of like ghetto where people would either like a happy few would be able to enjoy the real world, and then the masses would be into this like beautiful VR dreams that's completely disconnected from the reality. I think that technology can help shape the future and help shape a better future. So let's stop with the suspense, and I love this quote from Ready Player One. The secret sauce, I think, for the metaverse is a cocktail. And let me tell you why I think that. The real world basically has been shaped by millions of years of evolution, and the real world is perfect. Technology is something that we're developing quite recently, and it's imperfect. And I think that we shouldn't live in one or the two extremes, but we should try to combine the both in a beautiful cocktail. And I hope that Hollywood is going to be wrong about this vision of Ready Player One. But it just depends on us to take the right decision. At Dreamscape, this is our take of the metaverse.
Below us, there's a pod of whales that needs our help.
I didn't want to leave.
The coolest VR experience ever.
That was incredible. That was incredible.
It was one of the coolest experiences ever.
It was freaking amazing.
I went into an alien zoo. Unbelievable.
So if you've never tried it, you can go to the Mall of the Emirates and you can try our entertainment part, but there's much more than entertainment to that. We're active, and actually our biggest verticals are in education or in training and simulation. And I think that if you can really mix the real world with an augmented digital world, you can create a lot of amazing things. In our education fields, we realize that we can learn 4 times faster, and actually with 28% higher grades. So let's just try to take technology, take the good things of technology, but always remember that the real world is the best. Thank you.
Our final guest today is Mr. Sim Sekut. Sim led the digital government and digital policy area in the Republic of Estonia for the last 10 years. Most recently as the government CIO from 2017 to 2022. He has been recognized as one of the world's top 20 most influential people in digital government and was the co-founder of Estonia's groundbreaking e-residency program. His talk is titled, Outstanding Services Need Outstanding Delivery. Let's welcome him to the stage.
Hello, tere, in Estonian. Well, it's always good to be back in UAE. It's always good to be back in GX Talks and the summit. I'm glad the summit is alive and kicking in that sense. As the last speaker for the day, I actually thought not to add any more new ideas in a sense of what could be the future, but rather focus on exactly what Jonathan left us off. How do we build it? How do we make future happen? How do we make all these great ideas become a reality? Because, at least in my career, that was the thing that I was so consumed with. In Estonia, but I think overall around the world, there are so many good ideas. So many people have so many bright ideas what to do. We talk about proactive services, seamless services, predictive stuff, integrated stuff, you name it. I mean, we can talk about metaverse now. Lots of good ideas. How many of them become our reality? We have had live event services as the concept for, I think, almost 10 years, all the time I was in government, in digital government leadership role. How many true live event services are there in the world that we can daily use? This is a question not only in my mind. Last year, I spoke with about 20 leaders, 20 digital government leaders from around the world for the book that's about to come out. And the number one thing on their mind as well is delivery. How do we deliver? How do we make all these great ideas an actual practice in our governments? How do we really make the government experience meet the visions we have? So that is why I've been keen on this topic. Now, but to try to explain it a bit more, I'm going to tell also a bit of story in the line of storytelling. And this is based on a true story, and actually it is a true story. I won't name the names of governments, but you can do your guessing game. So once upon a time, there were 2 governments, great friends. It's about 3 years ago, they came to this idea that, well, artificial intelligence is here. What will artificial intelligence perhaps mean for us in governments? Well, among other things, it might offer us an opportunity that we could have virtual assistants as the interface to get stuff done with the government. The Siri in your phone, the Google Assistant, whatever the platform you choose, that's going to be how we use the services of government. That's how we're going to get information from a government. So if your passport's due to be renewed, you don't have to remember this. You don't have to get an email or a prompt on your phone. Basically, Siri just says, hey, Sim, your passport's expiring. Do you want to get a new one? That's the experience we could build. Now, 3 years ago, those two governments, they shared ideas. They sort of exchanged stuff like that. They started going further down this road. One of the governments had 100 million euros for it. How they approached it was they went around, talked about it. The vision became perhaps a bit better. Got 3 years down the line to the day, they're still talking about it. The other government, immediately in the first weeks of getting to this idea, started saying, hey, how can we make this happen? How can we perhaps have exactly Siri become the interface for our government? They started experimenting, playing stuff with stuff. 3 years later, they are here and getting a prize for the stuff and the work they do tomorrow. So, two governments, same idea, same ambition, but one of them delivered. And if we go further from this, I already said, we have had lots and lots of ideas. The best of governments, I would say, the most effective governments, are really keen on delivery. This is the end, what really counts. If we even go to the theory of innovation and the definitions of innovation, innovation is not the next great idea. Innovation is that next idea actually implemented. That will create the impact, that will create the change and that we want to see. And that's the delivery, not the delivery of a service, the delivery of the ideas and the visions. Now, if you talk about the how of the stuff, then if you look into my own Estonia's experience, or my own country's experience, if you look at the experience of those 20 great people that I had a chance to talk with about how to deliver stuff more, there are many tricks and methods that can work. But if I had to sum up a few here, I think we can try and do that. So for example, how to really deliver more. A few simple things, tricks each and every one of us can start doing today and tomorrow. And the number one thing, just start. You have an idea, start playing with it, just start doing the stuff. It's as ridiculous as it sounds, this doesn't happen so often in governments. We talk. You might have heard about analysis paralysis, right? We analyze, then we do a further study, then we do further research. Nothing gets implemented. Just start. Another thing, what does the starting mean? Yeah, well, you're not going to have perfect answers, but we have to experiment stuff. We have to play with stuff. If it doesn't work, iterate, change, pivot if necessary. But the key here is there's always going to be barriers. There's always going to be stuff on your way. People saying, no, it cannot be done, or there are reasons why it shouldn't work. The best of and the most effective governments who deliver are relentless on how, not why or why not, how to do stuff. So if I bring the example of online voting, for example, that's something that Estonia did back in 2005. Many people have said, there's no way you can securely vote online. We were relentless on the how, of figuring out, focused like an engineers, on how to make it secure. And that's what made it possible. And now we have half of the people voting online for parliament. So fixation on the how is what gets delivery happen. Another thing, keeping it simple. What often happens in governments, because we have many stakeholders, so, we have different things, compliances, things, political considerations, we make stuff too complex. In Estonia, each time we have failed, and we have failed many times, we have made things too complicated. We can't handle complexity. Keeping it simple is powerful. That's when stuff gets happened and delivered. And finally, the best of the governments really build the teams and do the daily routines to focus on delivery. Think about one thing. We all have meetings. What are the meetings about? What is the weekly meeting about? Is it about what did we deliver last week and what are we delivering this week? Or is it talk about something else, like the ideas and what's the next idea? These things start to matter. And I'm not speaking theory here. I mean, this is really how we built e-residency that I had the luck to be part of. This is, and not coincidentally, this is how startups work. This is how the companies work. This is how they grow big. This is basically building a startup. Why not in government then as well? But that's, in a way, a lot about how to deliver more and to start things. What is perhaps even more important but harder is to scale all the stuff. And I would argue this is really the heart of making the change happen and delivery happen. I mean, we can even go to theory in a sense of, there's one theory saying that innovation in public sector only becomes an innovation if it really is scaled throughout the whole government. And that is tedious, boring, hard work. But that's hard work that needs to be done for the scaling and systemic change to happen. So whether it's you build capacity, you raise awareness, you raise skills in your teams across the government, whether you work on coordination mechanisms, how to basically make all of the government go proactive, how do you nudge them, how do you steer them, whether it's how you do laws that, for example, force you to say that, hey, everything has to be available in metaverse, I mean, if we look into the future. Whether it's you build a platform so that basically allow the whole different agencies across the whole government to be more digital and offer services more proactively. Whether it's fixing the funding. I mean, I can go on. This all, literally, as one of my peers says, is boring governance stuff. But that's what needs to be fixed, because without that, we will only have pilots, prototypes, experiments, flagships, but not systemic change, not actual government experience improvement across the whole of government. But that's the game changer we want. So to end my story here, this is a bit of my rallying call. Let's focus on delivery. We need more ideas. We need new ideas too. Sharing of ideas is valuable, but delivery of the ideas is more valuable. So let's focus on that. Let's deliver more. And with the help of GX Talks, let's also keep sharing more on how to deliver stuff more. Thank you.